So have we started recording? Fantastic. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the March edition of the Development Environmental Services Committee agenda. Do we have any apologies, Matt?
No, Mr. Chair.
The adoption of the previous minutes, which have been emailed around, would someone like to move they are a true and accurate reflection of the previous meeting? Moved by Councillor Campbell. Seconded by Councillor Abbott. All in favour? Against is carried. Declarations of interest. Do we have any, Matt?
No received.
Thank you. Public participation. Gentlemen, we deal with that during each issue. I'll give you an opportunity to speak. And there will be an opportunity to reply as well to any other comment. We'll try and keep it fairly simple and very civil, and just as we speak, one at a time through me as the chair, please. There are no site inspections, so we'll go straight into business items. DESC 03.1, development application for the Lima gravel pit. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this DA number 132 of 2019 is for a gravel pit at lot 133 and lot 1 Rossgold Road, Dartbrook. The application was received on the 17th of October 2019. The application is being referred to the committee and to council because 5 submissions have been received. As most of you would be aware, there was a former quarry gravel pit on this site. It was actually approved back in 1996 under DA 85 of 1995, and that was operating up until March 2016 when the consent expired. Council subsequently received a DA for a new gravel quarry at the site. That was in 2017, and at the 17th of December 2018 meeting, Council resolved to defer the DA pending the submission of additional information. That application was subsequently withdrawn by the applicant, and now we've received this latest application in October of 2019. Since the application was lodged, there's been quite a bit of correspondence back and forth with the applicant requesting more information, and we have met with the applicant and their legal representatives as well. The site of the quarry, which I'll just bring up, I think we can bring it up on the screen here. So this is the Lima quarry. Yeah, so that's lot 1. So it's the quarry itself is about, all the gravel pits you can see just up in here. This area here. About 800 metres from Rossgold Road, and Rossgold Road intersects with Nandara Road further down off the screen. The application seeking approval to have a period of extraction for up to 25 years. The hours of operation for the gravel pit would be from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday and 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturdays, with no quarry operations on Sundays and public holidays. Operations would involve ripping and pushing to be carried out using bulldozers and front-end loaders and excavators, and material would be processed on site through the use of a crushing and screening plant. There'd also be establishment of parking and laydown areas, and access to the quarry would be via Rossgold Road. During our assessment of the application, we've identified quite a number of issues, and I guess the main issue that we've got was the lack of information that was submitted with the application, and a lot of the information we found to be inadequate. So, for example, the plans that were submitted, they didn't contain sufficient detail in accordance with the Environmental Planning Assessment Regulation and the schedules. The DA wasn't supported by a soil and water management plan which was a requirement of the Upper Hunter DCP. The DA didn't contain sufficient information to enable us to determine whether or not the proposal was a designated development. Under the Environmental Planning Assessment Regulation, extractive industries are identified as a form of designated development. If it's designated development, it requires the submission or preparation of an EIS, and the consent authority would be the regional planning panel rather than council. So it's quite important that we establish whether or not it is designated. Under the schedule, there are a number of different triggers for designated development. A couple of those are, for example, the extraction, the amount of extraction per annum, which is 30,000 cubic metres. Another trigger is the proximity to a natural waterway, which is 40 metres. And another trigger is the slope of the land, if it's over 18 degrees. The information that was provided wasn't clear enough for us to establish whether it triggered any of those particular matters. So we're unable to be satisfied whether or not it is designated development. The statement of environmental effects that was submitted wasn't a full comprehensive SEE. There was lots of separate documents that we had to sort of piece together. So we found that SEE was inadequate. The RMS, or Transport for New South Wales, had requested a traffic impact assessment. However, that was not submitted despite a number of requests. There's also concerns about rehabilitation on the site and the history of rehabilitation. There was a lack of information submitted around that. And the other issue identified was the fact that the different documents referred to different extraction rates. Some documents referred to 29,000 tonnes, others referred to 29,000 cubic metres. So there's quite a difference between those two figures when you look at the density of the material. So there was lots of inconsistencies.
Can I, sorry, butt into your presentation, Matt, or speech? I'm confused because the regulation in two different parts, one says 30,000 tonnes and another one says 30,000 cubic metres. Is that deliberate, or is that an error, or I couldn't quite understand that?
The trigger for designated development for extractive industries is 30,000 cubic metres. There is another form of designated development, which is crushing, screening and grinding plants, which is a different type of development. That trigger is 30,000 tonnes. The other trigger under the the Protection of Environment Operations regulations for the need to obtain a environmental protection licence is 30,000 tonnes. So there's all these different, ways you measure the extraction rates depending on the different pieces of legislation. So, as I said, we just found there was inconsistencies through the documentation. So the application was notified twice. We received a total of 5 submissions, raising various concerns about the adequacy of the information submitted, the truck movements, the adequacy of the road itself, Rossgall Road, concerns about the cattle grids and whether or not they were adequate on that road and who would be responsible for maintaining those cattle grids. There's also concerns about air quality, noise and vegetation removal. The submissions are summarised on page 22 of the agenda. So that basically covers those key issues I just identified. So based on our assessment, we've recommended refusal of the application for the reasons outlined on page 7 of the agenda. And I'd just like to point out too, just with reason H, that should be the proposed development is not considered to be in the public interest due to the likely environmental impacts and the inadequacy of the haulage route. rather than adequacy. That's on page 7. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
We have the proponent here, Frank. Would you like to speak or? Yeah.
Oh, look, just happy to answer any.
Yeah, you can use the stand if you like.
No,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, through the chair, I should just point out too, just back when it was considered by the D&E committee and council previously, the decision was to defer it because they did request further information to address, I guess, a lot of the issues that have been identified now. But the biggest concern, I guess, that we've got is just this uncertainty about whether it is designated development or not. I think that needs to be cleared up.
Okay, at this point I go around my fellow councillors. Lee, or?
The only way that can be approved is if we get the answers to the questions that we have, and that seems to be the first one. So if you're going to outline all those conditions, doesn't that take us back to where we were in 2019, asking for additional information? 17, sorry.
Through the chair, I guess the difference is now we have requested the information quite a number of times, I understand, 3 or 4 times. So we just haven't received the information we've been requesting.
So my queries, well, I'm concerned about the lack of information and the little rehabilitation that seems to have happened to date. And also in the submissions, there were concerns raised about air quality and essentially a water course, that the quarry would be near a water course, and soil and water management plans. So I am concerned that that there's insufficient detail to allay our concerns, and clearly residents who live by their concerns as well. They're just their comments.
Councillor?
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, is there any reason why the information hasn't been supplied? I mean, it just seems that it's gone back and backwards and forwards. But why hasn't this information been forthcoming? Is there any? I'd have to ask you, Frank. Is there any reason why the questions that the information that's been requested hasn't been forthcoming? Any reason why?
we believe we addressed most of those.
But,
And
well,
I
I guess that would be up to the director to say yes. Saying most, I think all of them had to be addressed. Wasn't that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you look at on page 1 of the agenda, it summarises the times that we've gone back and forth with the applicant requesting information. So you can see the dates in there.
Yeah, look, I'm noted and I'm quite happy for pro-development, but I think it's got to be under certain conditions. And if these matters are not addressed, I really think that we leave, as a councillor, leave ourselves wide open. If we don't have these things addressed, if all the issues are addressed, well, then you can make a proper decision.
Yeah, well, for my part, I'm cognizant that we have legal opinion, both our own and from outside as well. One of those is in this paperwork, one of which is subject to privilege. And that opinion is strongly of the fact that we have insufficient information with which to assess the application, which would make any approval extremely unsafe, and I think impossible. The second issue that hasn't had a lot of coverage in here, but also goes towards this designated development problem, and I think there are grey areas on that, particularly in terms of size, the watercourse, slope. I disagree with the comment that these two applications should be considered as one. I think that's wrong. They're two separate DAs and a thing, but that's my opinion. But we are noted as a customer of the gravel, and we are approving this, and we all know that the council needs gravel. It is an issue that we face. We're carting gravel uneconomic distances because of the lack of available gravel. I think because of the grey area of designated development, and I hear arguments on both sides, but if it was deemed designated development, then it would go to the RPP, and there could be perceived to be a conflict of interest there, and that makes me uncomfortable. You know, the thought could arise reasonably that we kept it as a not a designated development, so we could push it through or whatever, and that makes me uncomfortable. There are various issues where I remain unclear, probably chief of which is traffic management. The assumed truckloads at 32 tonnes brings down that number, but if, say, someone just wanted, say, 10 tonne of gravel, then et cetera, you're going to have more truck movements in the thing. The Roskell Road is not in good condition. That's not the proponent's problem. It's our problem. But as one of the other submitters pointed out, there should be a level playing field for all these developments. So while I have some sympathy with the proponent over this, that they are two small-scale operations that have been used for a considerable amount of time over the years. They provide a quality product that we could readily use. However, I cannot see a way that this committee can recommend approval.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask for a clarification? The Lima pit is the lower one, and the Roskell pit is the one right on top of the hill. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm not a voting member on this committee, but I must say, as Councillor Fisher said, we are trying to source materials right throughout our shire, proper materials. If everything was met and the issues that have been discussed were met and solved, I'd certainly be very interested to continue with the gravel pit. We're going to need sourcing gravel. Our rural roads are destroyed everywhere. We need material, but everything's got to be done properly. And as Councillor Fisher said, are we too involved and too close to be making that decision? But yeah, that's just my point of view.
I'd just like clarification, Mr. Chair, and it's actually you who raised it. I'm unclear how are we conflicted in the designated or non-designated? What did you mean by that?
If it's not a designated development, then we are the consent authority. If it is a designated development, it goes to the regional planning panel.
I understand that,
And
but
therefore,
what?
as a customer in need of gravel, we are also the consent authority. So I think that is, it's a possible perception of conflict of interest. Although you and I aren't the ones sourcing the gravel and saying we need, however many tons for, Flags Road or whatever road, or the Roskell Road. We are part of, we are the committee that will make a recommendation to the council. And ultimately, as councillors, we will decide one way or the other as well. So it just concerns me. It's been raised in the legal opinion, or one of the legal opinions here, and it makes me very uncomfortable, particularly when there are other red flags around the designated development and various other issues as well.
Mr. Chair, just a further clarification. Has the material been tested for suitability for?
Yes,
for road ground?
the test for the Lima quarry is included in your documentation in the back here, and it's good quality stuff, isn't it? Is there any other comment, questions, or discussion? Does a proponent have any other say? Or
Look, the problem that we've got here is that
I think the Roskell, my opinion, for what it's worth, I think the Roskell development is certainly because of the water course and possibly the slope and possibly the area. I mean, they're both butting up to that 2 hectare. The Lima, I'm not so sure about. I think the water course there, I'm not sure it's, what do you call it, first order within there. I think if it was mine, I'd be arguing that the Lima isn't. I think when there's an argument put forward by the lawyer for the Lower Roskell property, or one of those properties, that the road should be included, but you're not disturbing or proposing to disturb. I think the road is existing, so I don't think that should be counted. There are all sorts of counter arguments about the road, but certain other infrastructure in there. And to be honest, I don't think as a committee member that I've got enough information to say whether one is or one isn't designated development.
So, Matt, Mr. Pringle, through you, Mr. Chair, can you just clarify, because I was under the impression they were not designated?
The applications as they stand are not for designated, but we're not certain, we're not satisfied that that's not the case. We haven't got enough information to make that call.
Mr. Chair, I'll ask Frank, is there any reason why you can't provide the information and get the thing further on? This is what's holding it up. If they can't provide the information, then a decision can't be made. And so is there any reason why you can't provide the information requested? Mr. Chair, but isn't that, in my interpretation, if the information was required, and perhaps Mr. Pringle could lead me on that. Will that then be sufficient for us to make a decision? If the information that's been requested would be sufficient to make a decision?
Well, I guess, I mean, it's not just the designated development issue. There's other issues that need to be addressed as well. So the adequacy of the road, for example, air quality impacts and those sorts of things all need to be addressed as well. But I mean, starting point would be getting a proper detailed survey of the site and actually identifying the clear boundaries of the area of extraction, so we can identify the actual area to make sure that it's under the 2 hectares, and also measuring the distance from that area to the watercourses and providing details on the gradients of the site, those sorts of things. That's the sort of detail we need.
Is there any other comment, questions or discussion? Righto, before us we have a recommendation that council refuse the DA for the Lima quarry. Yeah, well, that's how I feel. So do we have, is that a move? So it's moved by Councillor Abbott, or were you moving? You moved by Councillor Watts, seconded by Councillor Abbott. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That is carried. Right, on to page 91, which is DA number 133, 2019, the Roscoe gravel quarry. Shall I hand over to you, Matt, or as to save? Is there anything you, well, no, I'll keep it to process. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is very similar to the last one, so I won't spend too much time on it. The application was received in October 2019. It's being referred to the committee and council because 4 submissions have been received in relation to this application. Similar to the Lima quarry, this Roscoe quarry was approved originally back in 1996, and the consent expired in 2016. The new application was lodged, which was subsequently withdrawn by the applicant back in 2018. The current application is to re-establish the quarry on the site. They're seeking a period of operation of 25 years. The quarry has an active area of about 1.95 hectares, and they're looking to extract up to 29,000 tonnes per annum. The same aspects of the proposal apply in terms of the hours of operation and so forth. Again, we have similar issues with this one in terms of it's not clear whether it's designated development. Inadequate information being submitted with the application. Soil and water management plan, again, hasn't been submitted with this one. The 4 submissions received, they raise concerns about the adequacy of the information, truck movements on Roscoe Road, air quality, noise and vegetation removal. And those submissions are summarised on page 104. Again, we've recommended refusal of this application for the same reasons as the Lima quarry. And those reasons are outlined on page 97 of the agenda.
Thank you, Matt. Frank, is there anything you would want to speak to here?
Look, we're on the same committee as previously.
Yeah.
But,
Thank you. Well, as you can probably gather from my original comments about the previous application, I think it's possibly much clearer that this probably is designated because of the watercourse and the 40-metre rule. So I personally don't see any avenue for us to approve. Has anyone else got any other comment?
No, my comments, I agree with you. I'd just like to add though, but I still believe that there is insufficient detail and that the roads are not an appropriate route. Dartbrook Road or Nandara Road, it's not an appropriate route coming off Roskill Road, and all the issues that were raised in the other application as well. So traffic, water, little rehab, air quality. But I also agree with you in that this is potentially designated development.
I think on that Nandara Road, I think once we do that Dartbrook Bridge, which we now have money for, that would become the obvious route out for any gravel that would ever be taken from this pit. But that's just a very brief comment.
So just further to that, the Dartbrook Bridge, the little wooden bridge.
Yeah, the iron one that was.
Iron one, so that's not heritage listed. That's going to be changed. Anyway, that's for another conversation. But just in terms of traffic, if that is to be considered a route out, we'll need more information on that too.
Absolutely, yeah, of course. Is there any other comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, my concern and in the existing route that would be travelled out, I don't believe it. You can't even take a semi-trailer up there, really. It's a beautiful drive, but it's too steep. And I can't see how that it could be taken, gravel could be taken out there, the truck and dog safely down that road. I think it's a totally inadequate route. The bottom, anyway, that's my concern about that.
Just one more, Mr. Chair. Mr. Pringle, if this was to go away and come back with satisfactory results, would we assess it again or would we hand it over? Remembering that if this did go ahead the bottom pit, if the powers that be would allow council to go in there, we would definitely have a massive conflict of interest with it. Correct?
Potentially, that's right. I guess at this point in time, we're not using the quarry, and I wasn't aware of any plans to use the gravel. But if we do intend in doing that, it might be worthwhile getting some advice on that and whether the application should be referred to the planning panel for consideration rather than council to avoid that conflict.
I have to say I disagree. We are named twice in the statement of environmental effects as a customer, as a previous customer. Where else would we take gravel for to do, say, the Roskill Road? It concerns me.
So just through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, the information we've been provided with today is the information that we must come to a decision on today. So some of the other stuff that's been mentioned is outside of this. So right now we've been provided with papers that lay out situations, and we're being told we've received insufficient information, and therefore with what we've got, the recommendation from council is that we refuse this development. So some of the other stuff is extraneous to that, and I think we should just stick with what we've got right in front of us. And yes, so I'm just a little bit concerned about some of the other conversations we're having. Thank you.
Noted. Okay, so do we have is there any other comment, question or discussion? No, we have a recommendation in front of us to refuse DA number 133 2019. Do I have a mover?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Moved Councillor Abbott, seconded by Councillor Campbell. All those in favour? Aye. Carried. Which moves us to page 178 of the agenda, which is development application number 106/2020 for a rural workers dwelling at 430 Timor Road, Langdale, Sturt. Over to you, Matt.
Thank Thank you, Mr Chair. So this application is seeking approval for an additional rural workers dwelling. So this will be a second rural workers dwelling on the property at 430 Tymall Road, Blandford. I might just see if we can get the map up on the screen so I can point out where it is. The property is currently used as a horse stud and cattle farm known as Langdale Park. Comprises an area of 50.28 hectares and it's located within the RU1 primary reduction zone. And the property presently features an existing dwelling house, an existing rural workers dwelling, approximately 3 outbuildings and varying rural infrastructure. So you can see the property up there on the screen. Hopefully that's clear enough where it is. As I said, it's 430 Tymall Road, Blandford. There's some plans that have been handed out to you all, A3 plans. There's one there that shows the entire property and the location of the proposed rural workers dwelling. So there's a principal dwelling closer to the front. Then there's a rural workers dwelling that was approved under DA 8 of 2018. And that was approved under delegated authority. And we've got the latest proposal for another rural workers dwelling. The application was notified for 14 days. Council received 5 submissions from 4 different submitters, raising various concerns with the proposal. A summary of the submissions is provided on pages 189 to 193. So there's quite a fair bit of detail there. Some of the concerns were about the size of the lot, that it was too small to support the proposed carrying capacity, and there was a lack of justification for it. There was also concerns about the use of the existing dwellings. It was alleged that one of the dwellings wasn't being used as a rural workers dwelling, it was being used by a family member. There's also concerns about the visual impacts of the development as well, the fact that the building would be visible from surrounding properties. I know there was also an issue raised about the legality of the existing rural workers dwelling that was approved under DA 8 of 2018, because that application wasn't publicly notified. At the time, that wasn't a requirement under Council's DCP, so that's why that didn't occur. All of the issues raised in the submissions have been addressed in the report. The applicant also submitted a business plan, which is attached to the report as well on page 205. This business plan provides the, I guess, the economic justification for the additional rural workers dwelling, and it is a requirement under our LEP that the applicant justify the need for that additional dwelling. So that plan certainly demonstrates there is that another rural workers dwelling is justified and can be supported. Our recommendation is therefore that the application be approved, subject to the conditions of consent in attachment 1. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Peter, would you like to make some comment or? Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hayden. Is the proposed structure visually acceptable? In other words, it's not just going to be a shack, it's going to be a nice dwelling. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I haven't really looked at that, but the new house is.
Yeah.
But we're led to believe that the old house was going to be demolished, so you end up with just the one building on that. That hasn't happened. So that's just being rented out now. So you end up like a little village of one house there, another house here, another house here, you know. When you're only really allowed one.
Number one, what sort of a dwelling is that? Number one, is that a nice dwelling, or is it just
What, the old one or the new?
Yeah, the old one. Yeah.
No, the old one's got quite run down, I believe. Yeah. So
Is it? But there are people still living in it.
they're renting. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Did you get the number of horses?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The carrying capacity set out in the assessment is 55 horses of varying growth stages and 29 to 51 steers. The business plan demonstrates that it is, yep.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I doubt that business case because it must be a very, very good place. But anyway, Matt, the old house that's there, was that to be demolished once the other house got built or not?
Through the chair, no.
So it's my understanding the old house is rented out, which is permissible.
That's correct.
The second house, the first rural workers dwelling, has the son and the father who's involved with the business as well.
I believe so, yes.
And the second dwelling, proposed dwelling, will have a worker which may or may not be the son, but that would be permissible even if it was the son.
That's correct.
So although it might be a little cute, it is permissible and legal.
That's right, yep.
As usual, I will seek the counsel of my fellow colleagues. I'll start on the other side.
I'm sorry, I am known as a proper development and approve a proper development. I really have learned something here today. I wasn't aware that you had to provide a business case before that you've got to put in, before putting another house. So I'm a little surprised at that. I really don't see any problem with a dwelling. Maybe it's a nice aesthetic dwelling that is visually acceptable. I really don't feel that I could oppose that. I think that if it's a proper designated house that is approved by council, then it should be allowed to go ahead. If conditions have changed from when Mr. Hayden originally knew about it, well, I guess that's what does happen. So am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, sorry, yep.
So, any comment?
I have comments. I'm concerned, reading through the submissions from neighbours, I am concerned that it is a relatively small block and for the number of horses and the 3 dwellings that, so just for clarification, you can have 3 dwellings on a property like this?
If you can demonstrate there is a need for an additional rural workers dwelling, that it can be justified, and they've provided that justification through the business plan. So there's under the, I think it's clause 4.2C of the LEP. I guess there's a number of tests that you need to meet. So the council is satisfied that there's a legitimate need for a rural workers dwelling. So they've been able to demonstrate that they can tick all those boxes.
So with respect to Mr. Hayden's submission and the fact that perhaps it's as just an extension of the family dwellings, is that a cause for concern? Should we revisit that? I mean, if we're looking, because rural workers dwelling, you would imagine that they were rural workers that you were trying to provide accommodation for. And I'm also concerned about the carrying capacity, and that we're in good times at the moment. And of course, human nature is we just automatically think this is normal. We know it's not. And that the drought was severe, was very severe in that area through Blandford during the drought. And so I'm concerned about carrying capacity too. And I'm not sure that that's actually really addressed in the supporting document that came with the proposal for the rural workers dwelling. I'm concerned. Yes. So anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. About to answer me.
No, that's all right. Look, at the end of the day, we have to rely on the business plan that's put to us, and we're satisfied that that demonstrates that there is a legitimate need for another rural workers dwelling on that property. I guess it doesn't matter at the end of the day whether they're family members or not, as long as they're engaged in agriculture on that property, they're employed in that business. It meets the requirements of the LEP. And
is there a finite amount of rural workers dwellings that any one property can have?
Well, obviously the more dwellings you have on the property, the harder it gets to be able to justify or provide that business case. Again, it depends on the size of the property as well. So there's numerous horse studs around Scone that have multiple rural workers dwellings on them. I know that most of them are a lot bigger than this particular property, but it's not uncommon in this area to have multiple rural workers dwellings.
Yes, so I understand that, but I from what I've heard, that's an issue for this property in that it is quite little.
As I said, they've provided the business plan, so I'm relying on that to demonstrate to me that it's capable of having another rural workers dwelling.
Any other comment, Lee?
Sometimes black and white doesn't always help us, does it? The business case to me doesn't add up with the numbers at all. But saying that, our job is to make a decision on what's in front of us, what's on our paper, and if they've actually demonstrated that the business case says that we can use or add the additional rural worker, we don't really, it kind of puts us in a position that we can't actually say that the information's incorrect, doesn't it? I don't think that's a fair question for you.
That's right. I mean, the only other option is, council could get the business case or business plan peer reviewed. That is an option, but that comes at a cost. And you'll see the options on page 179 of the report, or 179 of the agenda. There's 3 options there for council.
Yeah. And while, we asked for the business case, they've given us the business case. It says what it says, and we're supposed to now support that because it has shown that they've given us justification. I still don't think I can support it. So that's just it. Yeah, it is really hard. It is very difficult. Weighing up what's in front of you and what you can actually know in your own mind, especially with the number of animals that are on the property.
Yeah, for my mind, it's a property of around 50 hectares. And while the business case might be somewhat ambitious in numbers, I think it does provide the necessary justification. And while this might be a touch on I think I used the word cute earlier, but I think it is a little cute, but I think it is justifiable. So in this case, I'm happy. Actually, I shouldn't move from the chair, but do we have a by Councillor Campbell? A little late, but.
Sorry, yeah, just a couple of things.
Well, they're permitted to rent the original house out, is my understanding. Anyway, thank you.
No, I don't have anything further to say. I can understand there are ways in which that number of horses could be run successfully, but that goes into in a different area. But there is one thing that I think, which is not really to this, I've learnt this today regarding a dwelling on a small area. Quite often, larger places want to have their rural employees all in one place, then truck them out, then bust them out. But that's totally separate to this application, so it's only a comment.
Mr. Chair, just before you start again to put the motion, given that Councillor Campbell has had a few extra comments, can I have a few extra comments as well? Thank you. I think I take that as a yes. So I think the agriculture and business capability assessment is weak. It's very wishful. It's wishful thinking. I think you can't just sort of condition away actualities. And it is a small block. We've heard from somebody who lives nearby who has an understanding of what carrying capacity actually means. And we know that these are good times. This is as best as it's ever going to be. And I also would be concerned of 50 plus horses on such a small block of land. We do need to, I know people are grown, but we do need to factor in climate change, and it is changing. And I really do think this is a problem, because how many houses will we end up on a block like that with how many animals? And yeah, I personally think that yes, we went and got a document, which is good that we did that, but maybe we should have this peer reviewed. Maybe that would be the sensible thing, because I really, when you read it, there's wishful thinking here. Those are my views. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, are you still prepared to move the recommendation to approve?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
I'm prepared to second it. What's your?
To add a second at this stage to a peer review.
Yeah, my feeling on the peer review is that we have the business study. This will, and you said we went and got it. It wasn't council that went and got it. The proponent provided the business justification at our request. The second, the peer review would come at us, and it's just going to say the same thing, that most horses on a stud farm are supplementary fed. So the grass coverage is, the percentage of feed that they would be taking from natural pasture will naturally move up and down according to the season, and that number of horses is carryable on a 50-acre block. Yeah. I'm just telling you while I probably oppose it.
So can I put an amendment up that we actually look at a peer review of the business case?
I'll second that. I'll second that.
No, Mr. Chair, I'm quite happy with it. I think this is, there are ways of managing numbers of horses on there without causing any environmental and also health issues for the horses. And I just think that this is, it's been put towards it. I'm sorry for Mr. Hayden that he feels perhaps left out and on the sideline, but I really can't see that he's presented a good case for not having a dwelling on the land. But that's, anyway, I'm happy to stay with my original motion.
So I think I'm right in saying that that's 2 for and 2 against. Oh, sorry, Lee. I apologise.
Okay, thank you. So basically, I don't think what's in the report will add up or stack up if we end up in a drought in the future. Once we approve this, and we will have more droughts, they've got those numbers there. And I just think that the numbers that are involved in there do not meet, well, my expectations. So I think I would rather be on the safe side and the sure side and have that have it amended so that we can have a look.
Yes, you can speak because I spoke originally, so that's
Okay.
2 for and 2 against.
Right, so I'm going to speak as a seconder for this motion. I think this is a wise course that we do this because, as I've already commented previously, I think the agriculture and business capability assessment is very wishful. And yes, I agree with Councillor Watts. We know that the drought is going to come back. That's what's going to happen. And the carrying capacity is a concern. And yes, I take your point that thoroughbreds are fed by hand a lot. However, Mr. Hayden made a point that essentially we'll then be approving a feedlot, and because with that many horses. So I'm pleased that Councillor Watts has put this amended version forward. It's not ruling it out, but it means that we're getting peer review on a fairly nebulous business assessment. Thank you.
So for clarification, Councillor Watts, are you, is your amendment to defer pending receipt of a peer review? Yeah, so I think we're at 2-2 and the Mayor is with us as an ex officio member. Does he get the casting vote on this? Is that correct? You do. Over to you, Mr. Mayor. No, I do. You do. Even if the Mayor is in the room. Yes.
Can I just make one comment before we move on? The rented out property concerns me. I can have a problem with 3 family members. If the dad or the pop, whoever is elderly, he wants to semi-retire on the rural property and just be part of life. The other 2 buildings to me are warranted for workers and sons to I think they need that. But if one house is rented to an outside person, I have an issue there. Thank you.
That's my amendment that's still up at the moment.
Righto, and we got 2 for and 2 against. So how does that? I have the casting vote, righto. So the amendment is denied. Is that the correct word? Sorry. So we go back to the original motion.
And now you'll have to vote on it.
Right, for which Councillor Campbell moved and I seconded. And we're in favour and you are against. So it's carried by a deem of my casting vote.
Yeah, we need to.
Oh, sorry, we do, don't we? All those in favour? And again, which is Councillor Campbell and Councillor Fisher, and against Councillor Watts and Councillor Abbott. Right, now the last thing on the agenda is any councillor questions. Councillor Campbell, any questions?
No, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Cut you off quick. Councillor Abbott, you
Yes,
always have one.
I've always had a question, and it's back to climate change, and it's, I have asked this before, so I'm going to ask it again through you, Mr. Chair, but can we please have everything we do, can we have some sort of note on the climate emissions that we're then emitting as a council on for every single agenda item? So yes, that's a question and I'm going to keep asking until it happens. And that's, thank you.
Can I just get clarification on what you mean by that?
Yes.
Councillor Abbott?
Yes. So what I mean is when, so for everything we do, we're obviously emitting emissions, and I know, and I particularly applaud you, Mr. Pringle, for organising this, that we've had Ironbark Sustainability come and have a look at what we're doing. But now I think we need to list it so that the community sees it as well. And I know that's really difficult, but I know other councils, excuse me, are doing it. And I think we just need to be aware of everything we do, what we're contributing to emissions for this planet, which really very rapidly needs to reduce its emissions if we have any chance of survival as a human race. And I am allowed to keep asking and clarifying without interjections. So I really, and I know that you support the emission, us reducing our emissions. So if there is any way that we can do this, and I understand it will take consulting with other councils, but I just like this acknowledged, because we are contributors and we've acknowledged that, which is great. It is really good being part of a council that has, And so how are we now going to walk that talk? And I know that we've already started, but whether we can bring this into everything that we do. Thank you.
Councillor Watts, any questions? And I don't think I do have one. So that brings us to the conclusion. Thank you all for your input, consideration and time. It was a pretty hefty read this month. I think possibly the longest and most detailed of any D&E in my time on council. So thank you for all doing your homework, doing your reading and bringing your considered opinion respectfully to the table.